Welcome back, everyone. I just want to check if you can see my screen. And if you can see it, feel free to give a thumbs up or share in the chat. Let's see. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right. So this topic of happiness is something that I'd love to explore today. And specifically, the idea of conditional versus unconditional happiness. And let's see. And basically focusing on the latter, where we can be happy no matter what's going on in our lives. And normally, we often operate under the idea that if we get all of our external conditions to be just right, then we will be happy. Right? If I graduate from a good school, then I'll be happy. When I get a good job, then I'll be happy. If I get a promotion, move up the corporate ladder, then that happiness will come. If a loved one acts in a way that I want and hope for, then I'll feel good, I'll be happy. And if I take a vacation, right, same thing, then I'll feel good. But what happens when that vacation is over or Monday rolls around? What happens when people don't act in the way that we want them to? And so we've come to believe that happiness can only come about if we achieve certain things, only if we get our way. And in this way, our happiness is conditioned. We will mainly only be satisfied if the conditions align with how we want them to. And in thinking about happiness in this way, what we're doing is placing our happiness on conditions outside of ourselves. We might find ourselves often waiting and waiting and waiting for that happiness to arrive, waiting for those favorable conditions to come about. And so this happiness, when it does come, feels quite elusive, right? Now you might say, okay, fine. But what if I can work towards controlling those external conditions? Then I'll get what I want and I'll be happy, right? Okay, sure. Yeah. Totally fine. But, this doesn't even take into account whether whatever we want, ends up being harmful or not. That's a whole separate story. But sure, what's the big deal with that, with trying to control our external conditions? The whole kicker to this is that most of these external conditions we encounter lie beyond our control much of the time. There's many factors, situations, and actors involved that must converge under specific circumstances in order for a specific experience to arise in the way that it does. And the foil to this dream to control our external conditions and have things always go our way is the universal characteristic of change, the natural law of impermanence. And as Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, said, the only constant in life is change. Things break down, people change, our feelings shift, we grow older. And when the various factors, circumstances, and people change, as human beings, where we're capped with a certain amount of wisdom, a certain amount of energy and resources, and dealing with this, immutable force of change, it becomes impossible to make things go our way all the time. So what happens with this conditional type of happiness is that it doesn't last very long. And this type of happiness only lasts as long as the conditions go the way we want them to. When things don't go our way, and we insist that things must go our way, despite the reality, being otherwise, we're unhappy. And this is a natural human phenomena. We get upset, angry, jealous maybe if someone else's situation is better, tense, maybe anxious, worried. We suffer. With this conditional form of happiness, we inevitably experience suffering and unhappiness as well. When our happiness comes, we're so happy. But then when it goes, we're so unhappy. And so this phenomena, this natural human, phenomena, and not just human, just with life, is happening to everyone everywhere throughout millennia. In civilization after civilization, generation after generation, we have these ups, we have these downs. We also have conflicts and wars fought over differences in our wants and differences in our beliefs. So this is happening, throughout time. But then one day, here comes along Siddhartha Gautama, who, moved by a deep stirring within, makes the determination to cast off the usual worldly life, comes to sit down, and through a cultivation of stillness within, ultimately experiences for himself a different kind of happiness. And with this personal experience of understanding, Siddhartha Gautama becomes known as the Buddha, and decides to, upon encouragement, teach to the world and offer this knowledge of a radical alternative to this conditional or worldly happiness that we are used to. And what he shared was the existence of a lasting happiness, a happiness that's not conditioned and that's not rooted in anything outside of ourselves, one that's available to us here and now. And this flips the traditional concept of happiness on its head. Because with this, we need nothing to be happy. We don't need to wait for something to happen. We don't need to be anything. We don't need to do or achieve anything to be happy. And this is an unconditional happiness that, allows us to be happy no matter what's going on in our lives. So, according to the Buddhist teachings, happiness comes from a calm and still mind. A still mind is one that is free from wants, attachments, dislikes, or aversions, and is clear without confusion. When we think about it, a mind that is occupied with striving, with grasping or clinging, holding on, or pushing away, is a mind that is not at peace, a mind that's not at ease. Whereas a mind that can let go and is free from these negative states of mind is a mind at rest, a mind that is clear and open. And happiness arises from this calm and peaceful state of mind. It's a consequence of that. We don't have to go and find it. And this purest state of mind is called by many names, some of which include pure consciousness, essential nature, Buddha nature, or the original mind. But with all of this, I want to emphasize that, there's neither right or wrong about any of these forms of happiness. In this case, the Buddha simply pointed out that there were these two types of happiness. One that's based on sense pleasures, right? The more worldly happiness, and one that's not. And he pointed out its characteristics. So we shouldn't dismiss this conditional worldly happiness too, because we do feel real joy with it. The trouble comes when we expect this conditional happiness to provide us with, lasting, to be lasting. So if we know the nature of conditional happiness without expecting it to be otherwise, and then we can accept it for what it is and be more at peace and equanimous with that. So this unconditional happiness may seem like quite a tall order. The idea and practice of conditional or worldly happiness is so deeply ingrained in our society and taught to us since birth. It's infused in our, Western way of life as the main mode of operation. And culturally, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be happy. We know that, we're supposed to not sweat the small stuff, right? Not stress and take it easy. And yet we feel that pressure to be happy. And it's this very pressure, this expectation to be happy, that actually moves us further from it. So I'd love to offer us some practices that can help us kind of be in touch more and establish those conditions for unconditional happiness. And the first one is being kind to ourselves. We begin to unlearn bit by bit. We peel away the many layers of conditioning developed throughout the years. And this takes time and patience. without uh, a typical judgment or shame that comes about, and kindness towards ourselves. As a little example, I went out for a walk last night after being cooped up, and I was feeling a bit antsy. So just a bit jumbled, uneasy. And I wasn't liking that. And so I was not necessarily beating myself up for it, but I didn't like that I was not feeling great. And then at some point, I decided to give myself a little love. I told myself, it's okay. It's natural to feel this way. It's okay. And then I gave myself a little tenderness, a little kindness. And really, I gave myself permission to feel this way and not resist it. And after I did this, seconds later, I felt better. I felt more free, no more kind of pressure to be happy. Second is the practice of connecting to the present moment. So when we connect to the present moment, the landscape of the mind becomes quieter. Because by definition, when we're in the present, we are letting go of the past and the future. Now, what is it about being in the past and the future that's challenging for the mind? Often, when we're in the past, thinking about some memory, something that's already happened, we have a tendency to compare our current situation to what happened in the past. And that by itself is not necessarily problematic. But we tend to also have a tendency to want an unfavorable situation to be different. So we're comparing, maybe we had a moment in the past that we don't feel good about. Maybe we made some mistake, or we feel not great about what someone else did. And we're thinking that we don't want that to be the case. Or maybe we're thinking about our current situation, thinking that, oh, this current situation isn't as ideal as what this wonderful condition or state I was in the past. And so there's a lot of these comparisons that come about when we're thinking about the past and tending towards, these unfavorable situations and pushing them away or wanting things to be different. And with the future, our thoughts are often revolving around planning with projections of what might or what might not be. We create expectations, what we think should happen. And so that creates a lot of thoughts in the mind. And when we bring ourselves back to the present moment, there's a lot less to think about. And so some important critical practices is what we're doing right now. Right? Meditation and mindfulness practice. So meditation is the practice of training the mind to become focused and still, gathering up that attention, that steadiness of mind, and allowing it to settle. And mindfulness one definition of it is the practice of maintaining ourselves in the present moment. So these two go hand in hand, and they help to allow the mind to stay more quiet by being in the present moment, and also to stay focused on just one thing, right? This experience, this activity, or this one focus at hand. Another practice is connecting to ease. And this is an invitation to bring in more ease into daily moments. And I'm realizing more and more how incredibly important this concept of ease is for our practice. In fact, it's a foundational element of our practice. A tense mind is a mind that lacks ease. So bringing in ease into the moment works to calm the mind. But often we work from the opposite direction. We might think that we need to calm the mind first to bring in ease. But in fact, when we focus on ease first, it allows the mind to more easily settle down. Because when we're not happy, we're not content. One signal and sign of that within ourselves is the feeling of discomfort. So relaxing and bringing in a sense of comfort and ease to the body and mind can help shift our mood and contribute to contentment. And another practice is the practice of contentment, speaking of which. And this is something we can practice to help free ourselves from our desires and attachments. The first step is the invitation to accept what is, whatever is our reality at the moment. As Joseph Goldstein, a renowned Buddhist teacher, has said, it's okay. And it's okay even if it's not okay. And that became his personal mantra. And for me, my own personal mantra has become this reminder to myself that life is good. All things considered, life is good. And I have to remind myself that, okay, this is okay. And, a very deliberate practice is an appreciation or gratitude practice as well. And that can be different things. For some, that could be more formally writing it down in a journal, the things that we appreciate. It could also mean waking up in the morning and reminding ourselves, oh, wow, we have the gift of another day. This another breath, this another moment is a gift. So whatever comes naturally and unforced to you can be a great way to practice. And lastly, helping others. So I saw this little post by Sharon Salzberg where she wrote about, if you feel down, see if you can help others. And she said that science, in this little post, she mentioned that science has identified a happiness feedback loop where the more you help others, the happier you become. And when we help others, we are doing many things, including sharing generosity and compassion. When we practice generosity, we're giving away something we think is beneficial without conditions or attachment to outcome. And this very act of letting go is the antidote to desire and attachment, a root of our unhappiness. And when we help others, we extend compassion, an intention of care and no harm. And this is an antidote to hatred and aversion, another root of our unhappiness. So, as a recap, some practices that can help build the conditions for an unconditional happiness is to be kind to ourselves, to connect more and more to the present moment. Remember to connect to ease, relaxing the body, relaxing the mind in whatever way feels appropriate. Practice contentment and help others. So if we can practice this more and more, we can develop the stillness of mind that is the source for unconditional happiness. A happiness that comes from within us, not by chance or by circumstance. And we no longer have to wait for happiness, but instead, perhaps even have happiness as we're waiting, right, in line or whatever. Because true lasting happiness is here within us all along. And so I'd love to leave us with this question. What are we waiting for? And we might not have the answers, but this can be a place to kind of reflect more deeply and see what comes up within us. What are we waiting for?